this. This is a Chinese bow saw. The design is not really unique to China because you can find very, very similar designs in Europe and Asia, other parts of the world. But there are a few things that are really nice about it and worth noting. And I made this saw. If you want one, I recommend making one because the ones you can buy on the internet from China are not actually that good. So there's a few unique things about it. One is that the blade is mounted on pins that allow the blade to turn, and it's used, almost always, it's used at a 45-degree angle to the frame. And what this allows you to do, obviously, is to avoid hitting the frame when you're doing deep cuts, long rips. And the other thing is, it really allows you to see if you're using a bow saw with a fixed blade, even if you're doing joinery, you can't actually see straight down the blade. Whereas if you're doing like this, you can see exactly where it's square. Much easier, because you can just look down that thin blade and nothing is in the way of your eyesight. Of course, it doesn't have to be used in 45 degree, and this is not unique to Chinese saws. There are many European saws that have turning handles, usually handles like this. This is a saw I have not finished, but you can see it has some wooden handles, more of a European style. But European saws, there's also European saws that use bolts like this to mount the blade. Now, there's much more to it than this. So, if you make one of these, you don't need a whole lot. I think this is meant as an introduction to just the tool. And if people are interested, maybe I will do a series on how to make one. Or you can look it up yourself. There's a lot of great information. So the most difficult thing is the blade, because you can't really buy these blades. Now these usually used even today, a thin blade, thin and narrow. And so normally, you would see on European saws a longer blade and a thinner blade. I've made a number. If you just want to try out the design and you need something quick, you can take a bandsaw blade and just cut it to length and drill 2 holes. But a bandsaw blade is not ideal because it's they're usually only about ½ an inch at most. This is my pet parakeet. They're usually only ½ an inch at most in width, and they have too much set and often too aggressive teeth. So I recommend finding some steel. Now, in Japan, we're, for some reason, really lucky that you can buy this spring-tempered SK5 steel. This is what commercial saws are made from here in Japan, and I don't know what they're used for, these strips, but you can buy them in these strips which are ½ a millimeter by 20 millimeters, or roughly 3/4 of an inch in width, and they're perfect. You can also get them in thinner than ½ a millimeter. You can get 0.3 millimeters, which is what this blade is, and this blade. And if you're making a short saw, so this is my longer blade, and I have a longer cross section here where I use it. I use this stretcher. Just change out the blade, change out the stretcher, and you have a different saw. But when you use a longer blade, you need perhaps a thicker blade, a thicker steel. But it works. It works quite well. Really, I am liking the very, very thin saw. It's reminiscent, thin blades reminiscent of Japanese saws. It's about the same thickness as most Japanese saws, actually. The fine ones. And if you look at the kerf, I want to show you the kerf up close to the camera. It may be difficult to see. The kerf is extremely fine, because such a blade like this, it's not only is the blade thin, but it doesn't need a lot of set at all. So I can do a video on making the blade and also make it frame, but the blade is very, both are very simple. Making the blade is time consuming, but it's not difficult. So if you're interested, I highly recommend just, being patient, giving it a try. All you need is a saw file and a little bit of patience. But there are some really distinct advantages about this. So because the blade is under tension, you can get away with a very, very thin blade, like I'm doing. And I'm really liking, this is an 8 tooth per inch blade. I'm really liking having a very thin blade with fairly coarse teeth, because it just makes the work go by so fast. Like, it's really. I use this for ripping stock to dimensions. I'm going to make a longer blade as well, in a lower, maybe like 6 teeth per inch. But for now, this is really doing everything I needed to do. So let's see. Of course, you can put a narrower blade in here. Just buy a narrow bandsaw blade, maybe like a 1/4 inch. And you can use it to cut, like a jigsaw to cut curves, like a coping saw. You can make a crosscut blade to put in here, and this is just I've been using this saw exclusively in all of my projects recently, and I'm not actually finding myself wanting to reach for my really nice Western tenon saw or my really nice Japanese saws, unless the teeth are just too coarse, which if you're doing really small stuff, then this 8 tooth per inch blade is a little too big. But so there's a lot of advantages to this. If you're going to make one, I have a couple of basic pieces of advice, which are keep it light. You'll see some people make these very bulky and very heavy, and perhaps when you get a lot of experience using it and muscle memory and building up the muscles and forearm and whatnot, you can get away with a large frame, and you may even prefer it, who knows. But for myself, keeping the frame light and keeping the stretcher light in particular. So you see, I've really made this rather shapely, and I've kept this stretcher light. I made it out of, this is Japanese cypress. This one's a little too thin, actually. Where's my other one? What did I do with it? Oh. Yeah. Well, this is about the thickness I normally do. Keep it light, because when, at first, you're going to need to practice a little bit with how you hold the saw and how you guide it. And if the frame is too heavy, you're going to be all over the place trying to control it, especially in the beginning. But once you get used to it, you use it for a couple of weeks, you will get very, very, very accustomed to it. and it'll be just as natural as any other saw. And the other thing is, I forgot to mention, a unique point of these Chinese saws, Chinese style bow saws, is the way you hold it. So if you look at the way I'm holding it here, you have a rather long bolt, and one finger goes underneath, and the other 3 fingers on top. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to really control the saw very well, and it also allows you to, the force is more in line with the stroke. So if you used bow saws like way up here, one of the things you'll notice is that the force is kind of out of alignment with your hand, whereas if you get, the more you get lower or kind of like behind the grip, right behind the blade, the more that the power is in line with your hands. So that is one advantage of this design, one big advantage, I think, and one of the reasons I like it. And let's see, the other thing is a little bit about the blade. I already talked about it being thin. You can do the tensioning system here. You can do this with a threaded rod and like wing nuts or something. I've tried that, but I prefer a toggle system because the toggle is just faster, you know, and lighter as well. So I recommend going to toggle rod. It also looks better. So let's see. You can make the pins. The pins are probably the most difficult thing to make. And what I usually do is I find some bolts or some pinned rivets, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let's see, they're in here. So you can take a bolt, a regular bolt, maybe something around 3/8 or less. This is 8mm. These are 8mm as well. So that's what is that, 5/16, I think, something around there. And you can do it with a bolt, and you just drill a pin for the mounting point. I don't know, there's a bolt here and there's bolts this way to hold the blade, so it's supposed to get confusing when you try to explain it. But so you could take a bolt, just drill the pinhole, and then cut a slot along the length. But if you get these rivet pins, I'm not pin rivet. I don't know what these are. In Japan, they're called rivet pins, or pin rivet, something like that. I guess a pin goes in here. Maybe, I'm not knowledgeable of hardware. I do woodworking, but I don't know anything about hardware. But you get these, and they already have a hole drilled in them. And so all you have to do is enlarge that hole just a little bit. If you are using a larger pin, I'm going to use 3mm bolts to hold the blade, so I enlarged it a little bit. That's a lot easier than drilling a new hole yourself. And then just split this with a hacksaw, and go a little bit further than you think you need. And that's not that hard to do. You might be, if you've never done metalworking before, you may be intimidated by making your own saw blade. You may be intimidated by making these bolts here, but don't be. It's not difficult at all. I got it right my first try, so I got this right my first try, and wound up with a really, really good saw. So don't be intimidated. So that's how you do the bolts, and a quick introduction on how you do the saw here is you really only need one thing, which is a saw file. Oh, sorry, you need two things. So you need a saw file. three things if you count the blade material. So again, just find some spring steel. This is the hardest thing, is finding this. You may need to ask around where you can buy things. People, I had to special order this from when I lived in America. I had to special order this from some website, I forgot what. I happen to be lucky that they sell it in hardware stores here in Japan. If you're in Japan, it's called yakiiri ribbon. So literally tempered ribbon steel. I don't know. I have no idea what it's used for, but it makes great saw blades. So you need a saw file. These are Nicholson isn't great, but if you can buy them really cheap on eBay. You can buy boxes of them really cheap on eBay, so they work. These are slim taper. I think they're 8-inch or 7-inch slim taper. And so once you got your steel and your saw file, you mark out the teeth. What I like to do is put some masking tape down, and then I just measure out an inch, and then I subdivide that inch depending on how many teeth that I want. So maybe I subdivide it, each end and then the middle, and then the middle of each of those middles, and the middle of each of those middles, whatever, until you get the number of teeth you want. And just do that alone. That's probably the most time-consuming part, maybe even more so than filing the teeth, I'm not sure. And then finally, after you get the teeth filed like this, so what you're going to do is you're going to file them in a triangular shape like this, if they're ripped teeth. So you're holding the file with the flat face. You can do 90 degrees. I recommend a very aggressive rake on a bow saw. So just hold that flat, this side flat, and that's going to be the way the saw is facing and cutting. And then set the teeth. And what setting the teeth mean is for a saw blade to not get stuck in the cut, it needs to actually cut a slot, slightly a curve, slightly larger than the blade is thick. So the teeth are going to be set a little bit left and right, like this. I'm exaggerating here, but just a little bit. There are many ways to do that. What I used to do with large teeth is take a screwdriver and just insert it between a flathead screwdriver, insert it between the teeth and twist. And then go to the next tooth and do the opposite way and twist. Opposite way and twist. That works great. It's a little dangerous because you can slip off the tooth and then jam your hand into the blade. And it doesn't work on thick plates very well. But a saw set like this is the easiest way, and the way I kind of recommend now. You can also take an old file and cut a slot that fits over the teeth in the side of it, and put that slot over a tooth and then bend and then bend and then bend. But that's difficult as well. It works fine if you're used to it, but for a beginner it's a little tough. Actually, the tough part is making the slot, finding a really thin slot that will not be too wide. If you have a Dremel that cuts like a half millimeter kerf, that would work great, but I don't have such a thing, so let's see. I've rambled on quite a bit, but yeah, I think that's all that I have to say for the intro. Oh, one more important point if you're building one. Sorry. One more very important point is that these bolts need to be very, very tight fit into the handles. So when you drill the hole for the handles, you need to drill a smaller hole than the size of the bolt. And you need to get Maybe 0.3 millimeters, 0.2 millimeters, 0.3 millimeters, maybe 0.5 millimeters smaller than the bolt that you're using. And it needs to be such a tight fit that you can't easily, you should require a pair of pliers to turn the bolt. You may be able to turn the bolt with a blade by twisting the blade here, but you really don't want it to be easy to do that, because even with tension on the saw, if you are cutting and you're doing a long rip or something, and you can twist the frame, which twists the blade, and if you then, with a fair amount of strength, if you go all the way to the end of the saw, boom, and you have a firm grip, you can actually twist the bolt and twist the blade, and so your blade is like twisted this way by accident. You don't want your blade to be locked in a very solidly in a position. If it twists on you, if these things twist on you, then you are in trouble. Oops, sorry, I have an alarm there. There's no production quality here. I don't have time. So please forgive all the random stuff. So yeah, you really don't want this blade twisting on you, and that's one of the problems I have with any store-bought saw. Like cheap Chinese store-bought saws of this design, is they don't have really solid bolts, and they don't have good blades. So make your own, and you'll be pleased. Alright, so I think that's all I have to say about these Chinese bow saws. If you are interested in making one, you can make them all kinds of lengths, all kinds of sizes, any blade you want. Then let me know, and I'll try and do a video when I can. Or I'll just send you a link of, I'll probably post a link in the description of you can watch a Chinese woodworker making one of these. And it's all in Mandarin. I don't speak Mandarin, so I can't help you there. But you can see pretty clearly what he's doing and how he's doing it. So that's all for today, and hope you enjoyed it.